Whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Here's your look at the Mezco toys. This is A Nightmare on Elm Street 112 Collective, Freddy Krueger. The 112 Collective Freddy Krueger features 4 head portraits capturing the fearsome expressions of the Dream Demon, including one with a removable faceplate that reveals a skull sculpt from the iconic scene where Freddy and Tina have a fatal encounter. Freddy is outfitted in his infamous striped sweater and comes complete with signature clawed gloves and a trash can lid straight from Tina's nightmare. Those looking to pick up Freddy Krueger for yourself and want to know how tall the Dream Demon stands, let me provide this service to you guys. We're going to put the tape measure right to the very top of what I believe to be his head, right there. And according to the readout, you're looking at the 112 Collective, A Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger. That was a mouthful. 6.3 inches in height. And how does that translate to centimeters? Let me lay that on you. 16.2 centimeters tall. Let's get the basics out of the way before we look at all the accessories that Freddy Krueger comes included with. If you've collected 112 along the ways, I haven't collected all of them nearly, but you certainly are treated to this as a regular occurrence. This is the 112 Collective, little baggie, little Ziploc bag that you can put all your accessories into. Of course, yes, you could put them back into the packaging, the ones that you don't need, but it's a lot easier just to grab access to a bag where you can, of course, write Freddy Krueger's name right down here in the white section of the bag and just keep everything securely, in place and in one location. This is also handy because I know for myself, at least, I don't want to be going through the various boxes of things that I've collected and have to try to find Freddy Krueger's box. It's a lot easier just to kind of keep these in the drawer with, like I said, all the accessories that you need. The other thing that he comes included with, which you probably have seen with all of the 112 Collective figures, not necessarily the black display stand with my fingerprints all over it, although these are magnets to fingerprints, but you are usually treated to the circular display stand in which the figure stands on top of. What would be, of course, different is the fact that it's got Nightmare on Elm Street on the top here with the rather trademarked poster, the one that started it all. You've got the shocked look on Nancy's face. Slightly omitted, unfortunately, is the skull face of Freddy Krueger, but I understand, of course, they couldn't put all of that onto the display stand. They picked and chose what specifically was the more important aspects of it, and I think if Freddy Krueger is going to be standing on top of a display stand, it would make sense that the focal point on it was Nancy. Rather clever, and I'm sure not intentional. Maybe it is intentional, I don't know. But they actually put the connector peg there for Freddy's foot on the very end of Freddy's blade. I'm sure it was just a case that they wanted to center Nancy, but it's interesting that the peg point has the little star glimmer projecting out from that. That's a nice, clever, probably unintentional thing that they did there. The stand itself, you can take Freddy Krueger, and he has peg holes on the undersides of both of his heels, so you can decide which foot you want to attach to the stand. You can just attach them like so. I'll probably be displaying Freddy most likely with the stand as a standing figure. The option also is available as well. I'll just get Freddy to stand here for a second. Is he does also come with the adjustable clamp. This goes around his waist. And I guess if you want to have Freddy Krueger levitating, I can't imagine he's going to be jumping and leaping around, but certainly if you want to have him levitating, you can pull off such a feat by the adjustable neck that has 3 connector points, or 3 adjustable knuckle points, and of course the open and close waist clip. I'm still a little uneasy when these are done in clear plastic, especially in this case. I may want to loosen that screw just a little bit because I found like the waist clip is maybe a little too tight for my liking. I don't want to be opening this up, and certainly this being clear plastic, that would most definitely break if I wasn't careful. If you want to connect it to the base, you simply just want to flip this around, and you see how it's got a broader peg on the back and then the smaller peg on the front. Just take the circular part and just pop it against. Actually, you know what, you could even do it on this side here too. Just pop that through, and that'll pop the peg out, and then you just mount that on top. At the end of the day, though, I'll probably likely just be displaying him as is, unless I want to display him in epic battle with Jason Voorhees. Maybe I might have them leaping in that case. But I think in a case like this, I'll probably just display him with him standing up top of a display stand. Overall, like the display stand, the shape is rather familiar, but at least the decoration, the deco that they put on top of it, again, very unique to Freddy Krueger. When we get to having a look at the accessories, Freddy Krueger does come with a fair bit. I was really surprised to find out and hear initially when this guy was going to be released that we were going to be getting not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 interchangeable heads. Some are pretty close to one another. Don't worry, we'll look at all of those in a second. But I guess the one thing we will look at that's not specific to something you're going to be putting on Freddy Krueger is the trash can lid. The lid itself, a little banged up, and as you can see there, it's got some nice silver paint that's been applied to it. It's likely been a darker colored plastic, and they simply just dry brush silver over it, but it gives you a really neat effect. Something, of course, that looks like a real trash can lid. And it's something, of course, you're probably just going to be laying, probably just drape it on top of the stand off to the side, I think, if anything, and I'll probably just put Freddy Krueger on top. So maybe I'll just put like the trash can like that. There's not really much else you can do with it. It's a trash can lid. I'm really actually surprised if this is the first outing of Freddy Krueger that they wouldn't have given him the iconic lengthed arms. Now, obviously, I can understand why they wouldn't, because you're using a fabric costumed character. It would be very difficult to want to have to pull off the sweater to give him an interchangeable option, not unless they gave you just plastic arms, which I guess that would ultimately look a little off from the rest of his outfit. So yes, that probably makes some sense as to why they didn't include the lengthed extended arms that he has in the alleyway there. Nonetheless, though, the other accessories Freddy comes included with is his fedora. And of course, you couldn't have a Freddy Krueger figure without his fedora. And the fedora itself is done quite nicely in a more darker brown. It's kind of a grayish brown, if anything else. It sits well on his head, so we'll take the existing figure head portrait. And as you can see, the fedora fits perfectly fine over top of his head. This works the same, of course, as we have a look at all the other head sculpts, all of which we will look at in a second. But overall, not a bad fedora. I have no real issues, negative points I could really talk about that. Then, of course, we have Freddy Krueger's head. We can start looking at those right now, and then we'll look at his hands. This, I believe, was the defaulted head. Now, I've been playing around with this guy, obviously popping off different heads and swapping things out. But I think this is the defaulted head when you get him immediately out of packaging. The defaulted head is more sterner-looking faced Freddy. You can see all the welts and the scarring from his burns. You can see have opened up and exposed sores with some nice sheen added to those open areas of sores. Even like on this side, it's really nicely done the way they've done that. I overall pretty impressed with the 112 collective head sculpts. The Jason Voorhees was really quite nice, and really happy with how the Freddy Krueger turned out. The paint is really quite clean on this guy. I don't see really any mishaps, although mishaps could be pulled off, I think, on a figure like this because he's scarred. But generally the paint is very clean. And the flesh tone is very, very good on this guy. Let's flip him around so you guys can see the back there. The scarring of the ears, you can see the wrinkles that have formed on his skin. As this, of course, the burned flesh has started healing itself. Not completely, as you can see there, not completely at all. Really nice sculpting on that head portrait. Now, he does have a couple of variations to that. I guess the next one we can look at here is the more laughing version of Freddy Krueger. Here is an option where you can now see a little bit more of the very discolored teeth that he has sported there versus the more, like I said, the more neutral head portrait. Any one of these, by the way, if you're looking to swap these out, just grab the torso piece here and just very carefully pop that off of the ball joint. Find the one that you want to use and just pop that back onto the ball joint. You'll hear a very satisfying snap. And then you can either go without the fedora, or if your preferred preference is to display him with the fedora, again, any one of the head portraits work that way. The other head sculpt, we'll look at the next one here, is this one here. Kind of a more angry or more concerned Freddy Krueger, if we want to go with those different ways to describe these. Of all the head portraits, I'm least interested in this one. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I don't think it's a really complimentary head portrait for this particular character. Smiling Freddy, yeah, sure makes sense. The more neutral Freddy makes perfect sense as well. This one is just okay in my books. And last but certainly not least, we have, let me see if I can grab it here, for example, is we have this Freddy, which does look a little off when you look at it. In fact, you can probably see the seam lines around it, making you think that there's something not quite right with this particular Freddy portrait. And you probably would, your assumptions would be correct. If you can just take the face, peel it off, and like in the film, you've got Freddy's skull face underneath that. A gruesome sight, but very well sculpted by Mezco. You can see there the tendons on the sides there. The visible teeth minus their lips, what would have been the area where the nose was placed, and of course the socketed sections where the veined eyes. Let me just see if you get a close-up look there. There's the eyes right there. What a gruesome looking sight. Now ideally they could have easily just given us this head portrait minus the face, but I must say I'm really impressed the fact that they actually even gave us a face that could technically attach, well not even technically, can in fact attach to the face, or to the rest of the head. Really nicely done. Well done on Mezco's part for doing that. At the end of the day, I mean, you know, of course you could display Freddy. The benefit of having the Ziploc bag readily available is that if you do change your mind throughout the course of displaying this guy, you could quite easily just go back to the bag and pull the head sculpt or whatever options you want to swap him out for. It's just a lot easier than having to go rummaging through all the boxes that you have in your storage to try to find all the rest of Freddy's accessories. At the end of the day, though, let me just pop off the least liked head portrait. I'll just put that on there so that you guys can see what it looks like. I guess low enough. If you have it low enough, it's not so bad. I just think this one is okay. It's just okay. Like I said, would prefer the smiling one, if anything, or just go back to the defaulted head portrait. Because Freddy didn't really have a whole lot of expressions for the very first outing of Nightmare on Elm Street. Anyways, we'll go with another head sculpt for the time being. Maybe I'll just pop back on the smiling Freddy. That's a good one to go with. There we go. And then we'll resume the rest of this review. He does have a couple of interchangeable hands. This is certainly one thing I want to talk about, is of course he does have the gloved hands. Now this is obviously made of plastic. You can see how nicely painted they've done the gloves by incorporating that additional kind of gold color on the little ringlets on the bottom, on the back there, the back section of his glove. The glove is, like I said, very nicely done. But as you could probably guess it, these are all very thin plastic. So you want to be very, very careful swapping out the hands. The other hand that he has included with, certainly from a glove standpoint, is this hand right here. Now, you probably can already see what I'm about to mention, and that is the concerning nature of trying to change out these hands. If you take the hand off, you want to really kind of grab it from the palm and the back there and just wiggle it off. What you will see is when you pop this off, hopefully this will happen for you, is that the bottom of the glove stays behind. That's really what you want. What you don't want is the next thing you're about to do, and that's put on this gloved hand. Let me just put this back on because it's certainly something I'm going to mention. When you are putting this on the actual little peg point, there's really not a lot you can hold on to. And what ends up happening is, what hasn't happened yet, is you're going to be putting pressure against these blades and breaking them. I did notice, though, that Mezco has a removable blade. It seems intentional, the way that they've pegged that. There's a square peg, and obviously that connects in place like that. I'm thinking that they've done that in a way that when you do remove that one blade, it frees up at least a little bit of an area where you can still get a hold of the glove and push it down. If it wasn't for that, I can imagine the heartache of pushing down on that one blade, or trying to work around it at the very least, and having that break off. And that plugs it back into place. Then when you've got that in securely attached to the socket, then by all means you can go ahead and add the finger blade and just attach that in place like so. Everything is so small on this piece. I mean, being that it's a 1/12 collective, everything is microscopic, or the closest thing to being microscopic. You just attach that in place like so. Whoops. And try not to drop it in the process. And this is what the gloved hand looks like when you eventually get it into the socket. It's fine and good, and I am happy that you can remove that blade. But the only downside, though, is you can only do it so many times. The first time you do it, it still stays securely in place when you put it back. Frequent times after the fact, it seems like almost just sneezing on it will knock that blade off. So I want to be very, very careful that I don't knock that off anytime soon. Certainly during this review, that's a pretty small thing to have to track down on the floor. The other accessory he does come include with a series of interchangeable hands, not one of which you have to be worrying as much about, but he does have the flat palm, as you can see, on both sides. Nice detailing done on both sides of the hands. I also want to bring up the sleeve so that you guys can see. The sculpting goes all the way up, or as far up as I can get it. Even like to the sections of the elbow, he has full scarring. If you bring up this section here, yeah, Freddy looks a little bit too muscular, but at least from up to his elbows, he's fully scarred all the way up. His interchangeable hands include a fist, not too super exciting there. He does also include a gripping hand, or a slightly more dynamic hand. And he also comes with this hand. Let me just go ahead and pop this off so you guys can see. Just wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. There we go. And we'll replace it with this hand here. Again, you have very small joints to work with. The pegs on the hands, certainly on the wrists, shift around a lot when you're trying to peg something in place. You can see that he does have the cut off 2 fingers as an option for displaying the figure as well, which is probably something I may consider doing when it comes to displaying this particular Freddy. You can see really the squirting of mucousy ooze squeezing its way out, or forcing its way out of his now severed fingers. Boy, oh boy, does that ever look really, really cool. I'll likely, like I said, display it probably with that. So those are the accessories that come included with the 1/12 Freddy. Really surprised for how much we actually got with this guy. Let me put on a dynamic hand. There we go. Just attach that in place. I'm really, again, pleasantly surprised. I mean, again, when press releases surfaced this guy online, we already knew the kind of stuff that we were going to be getting, the 4 interchangeable heads, all the hands and stuff like that. But seeing it in hand, how much he actually comes included with, and that each one of the heads, for the most part, are unique to one another, and the hands are unique to one another. You really do get a fair bit for this Freddy. Now, it's not completely perfect. There are some problems with the Freddy figure. We'll talk about that right now. I guess the big one being his sweater. Obviously omitted here are the sleeve stripes. The stripes would come at Freddy's Revenge, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. So the original Freddy sweater would have only had regular solid sleeves with only the striping in the middle. Unfortunately, though, with the striping on the sweater, it does come across and read to me more just like printed green. Literally, like they just took a machine and printed bands of green across. Then it does actually feel like a legitimate sweater. The sweater is dirtied, and they've added some like little dirt and, you know, scuffing and stuff to it. So I'll give that some credit. The material is not quite what you would expect for a sweater. I mean, in a way, it's good because it doesn't limit what you can actually do with the articulation on this figure, but it does ultimately kind of look more like, it's not quite like a felt, but it's a very fine stitched or fine fabric. It's definitely not a sweater type of fabric. I am bothered, though, by the striping, though. Kind of wish they could have done things a little bit differently. I don't expect them certainly to stitch together 2 different alternating colors, but it does, for me at least, read very, very more mechanically done rather than something that would look like this on a sweater. Anyways, he does also have his, of course, brown slacks and brown shoes. The shoes themselves, or boots themselves, do have their own articulation point. causes some problem when I find displaying and standing Freddy straight up. Thank goodness he does come with the display stand, because the boots, while they can be posed down, this boot seems to work a little bit better than the other. You can't quite, if they only had left enough clearance just above, you can see the lace is done right there, very nice. But if they had just given enough of a clearance here where you could have brought the foot a little bit more forward, kind of never feels like he stands completely leveled. It always feels like his feet are almost even on an angle. Like even this foot here, you can see it sort of angles down. This causes a bit of a problem when it comes to standing this particular figure, that a lot of times, thank goodness I have the display stand, that I would just display him with that. But if I'm displaying him on his own, there's a couple of times already re-recording some of the part of this review that the figure's fallen over, just simply because his feet can't go any further forward than what he's doing right now. For this guy's articulation, we'll talk about that right now. His head rotates all the way around. You sort of saw how everything is assembled on this guy. He has a really good amount of articulation via that ball joint that's attached to the socket of his neck. You can move him quite a bit. The shoulders, and again, good thing that they didn't use a big bulky sweater, despite my feelings for the stripes, but it does give you a lot of good amount of articulation posability. You can move his arms quite a bit. Of course, natural bunching up is going to happen around the shoulder section when you are moving his arms back and forth, but he doesn't seem too limited. In fact, there's a lot of what I can really do on normal figures I can most definitely do here on the 112 version of Freddy as well. He has a swivel at the bicep, he has a double hinge on the elbow, and then he has articulation. You can swivel the hands all the way around. Again, even on this hand here. Just again, when you are changing out the hands, you just want to remember that the cuff or the bottom of the glove stays behind. As for his legs split out. Oh, we of course can't forget he has an upper torso ball joint. He has a lower torso ball joint. His legs split out. They go forward, they go back. There goes the blade. I knew that was going to happen. I can see it. It's right there. Swivel at the top, cut at the thigh. He has a double hinge on the knee. And then he has articulation in the boots. The feet go all the way around. Not much, I have to admit, in a way of an ankle pivot. And again, you can move the feet up and down, but not too much at all. Of course, the elephant in the room when it comes to 112 collective figures is, sure, they look good. I'm really impressed with how the Freddy Krueger turned out. He's got some detailing that even like retro cloth figures haven't been able to pull off. Unfortunately, though, the elephant in the room is the fact that the 112 collective figures, on average, here, well, in the US, they're on average about an $80 price point. In Canada, that unfortunately spirals out of control and ultimately results in these figures usually being at around $100 to $110. For me personally speaking, for a figure that stands this size, as good as the detail may be, that's the one thing that causes me a lot of times really reluctantly wanting to pick these up. There's certain figures, yes, in fact I would pick up. The Freddy Krueger, for example. The Pennywise, just recently picked that up, and a review of him will be coming. And of course Jason Voorhees were all no-brainers. But when it comes to other figures, maybe in the realm of DC and Marvel, I have to be kind of pick and choose the ones that I want to get. Because at the end of the day, you're still getting a figure that's a little bit smaller than some of the other figures in your collection. Yes, he does have fabric, but at $110, that's a pretty hard pill to swallow, even as good as this Freddy may actually be. Despite the high ticket price that Mezco Toys are asking for the 112 collective figures, $80 US out of the gates. And of course, that gets converted even higher here in Canada. When you do get them home, in honest truth, when you get them out of the packaging, they're nice looking figures. The sculpting on some of these are absolutely stunning. That Michael Myers was a little disappointing for me because I felt like he lacked the paint in his mask. But it was redeemed, I think, for Jason Voorhees. Freddy Krueger, I would say, is a positive figure, more positives than negatives, with really only the negative points possibly being the striping on his sweater. It definitely does look more artificial than it does look like a real stripe on a sweater. But the head sculpts are gorgeous on all of these pieces, with one of them being okay in my books. The smiling Freddy, the neutral Freddy, and of course the peeled away face with the skull underneath are all gorgeous to look at and strong contenders for which way you want to display the figure. He does also have interchangeable gloved hands. One gloved hand Thank goodness at least they have the removable blade, because I even asked myself, how would I be able to possibly get this onto the peg point, the peg socket, without breaking any one of those blades? And knock on wood, none of that has happened so far. Like I said, though, good thing that they did have the removable pointer finger blade, but ever since I've removed it that one time, it doesn't stay in place as well as it should, and it falls off a little too frequently. Just keep that in mind if you're looking to pick up this one for yourself, that you may want to make sure you put it on a place, on a shelf area, where it's not going to fall over or nothing's going to fall off of them like those finger blades and get lost. These are a more small, intricate piece, what you would expect with the 112 collected figures, which I guess is why it asks the price that it does. As great as these figures are, and as great as the tailoring on the fabric is, it's still hard to justify $80 when you think of some 6-scale figure companies that are releasing 12-inch figures for about $150, $120 to $150. When you get these smaller 112 collective figures at, for me in Canada, $110, it does get awfully pricey. Freddy Krueger I would certainly make the jump for, but it's one of the reasonings why I don't review more of them on this channel. It's definitely a more premium figure. Get this guy for a stunning rendition of Freddy Krueger, but you know when you are picking up a piece like this, you're going to be paying a little bit more out of the wallet than what you would with standard 7-inch figures or other cloth figures, like some of the stuff that NECA Toys are producing. NECA Toys, by contrast, and I really don't want to compare one to the other because this is its own thing, and retro cloth figures are their own thing. But usually here in Canada, you can get a retro cloth figure from NECA Toys for about $35. The Freddy Krueger here, as great as he looks, is a lot more than that. Over double the amount. So again, it's something that you may want to add to your collection, but it can get awfully steep when you're looking to pick up every single one of the 112 collective figures, so you may want to be a little choosy as to which ones you want to add to your collection. If you managed to pick up the Freddy Krueger for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of him. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. Even if the sweater is meh, I'm overall pretty happy with this one, and I hope that we're going to be getting other Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Kruegers. Let's not just stop with the first one. Same with let's just not stop with, part 3 for Jason Voorhees. Let's get a couple more of these going. Either way, though, guys, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of this figure. If you are new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. And stay tuned, because we're going to have a bunch of stuff coming up in some upcoming video reviews. As I said and tipped my hat early, we're going to be having a look at the remake Pennywise, or the remake It movie. We're going to be looking at the Pennywise 112 collective figure. His review will be coming up soon, so keep an eye for that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.